Hello students, welcome back to your science class. Today we are heading into chapter 4. So chapter 4 is about a variety of living things. We're going to start off with chapter 4.1, species. So this is your this is your word for your chapter. So what are we learning today? We are learning to recall what a species is. Secondly, we are learning to identify variation in the different characteristics of different species. And lastly, we are learning to recall reasons why a species may become extinct. Before we head into chapter 4.1, we are going to do some recap session. So in our previous lessons, we were talking about the human's impact on the environment. Human activities such as poaching and deforestation can actually damage the food chains. For example, if humans were to hunt deer for food, the lion would have less food and they may die, right? That means the lion may die. And if humans were to kill the lion, the deer's population would actually increase without having the lion to control the amount of deer in the food chain. So this would actually lead to a shortage of grass for other herbivores in the environment. So imagine if humans were to cut down forests, what do you think would happen? So I believe that if humans were to cut down forests, the herbivores such as deer and carnivores such as lion would lose its place to live, right? So they will lose their home and then they will lose their shelter and they will lose, it will be much more difficult for them to find food as well, right? It will actually affect the whole food chain. And next we did talk about pollutions. All right, so increasing human population has actually led to an increase in pollution. So as humans, we do use air conditioners, fridges, and spray cans. And by using by using all these electronics, you actually release something else called chlorofluorocarbons, right? And that will actually cause ozone depletion. And we also did talk about combustion of fossil fuels will actually release greenhouse gases that will actually cause global warming. This combustion of fossil fuels will also release poisonous chemicals that would cause smog. And they would also cause harmful they will also release harmful gases that causes acid rain. And lastly, we did talk about renewable energy resources and non-renewable energy resources. So the most common feature for a renewable energy resource, it means that this resource can be replaced by a natural process in a very short amount of time. Whereas for non-renewable energy resource, these are natural resources that either cannot be replaced or may take millions of years by natural process to actually replenish it. So examples of renewable energy resource, wind, waves, tides, solar power, hydroelectricity. So examples of non-renewable energy resource includes petrol, coal, natural gas, and fossil fuels. Without further ado, we are heading into species. All right. So every organism has their own set of features or characteristics, right? They have their own sets of features or characteristics. So variation in these characteristics actually help us to recognize different organisms. For example, a lion and tiger, they may look the same, but they have different features or different characteristics to help us tell which one is a tiger and which one is a lion. So for example, we have a tiger here. So these are some features of a tiger. They have golden color stripe. Sorry, their body is golden color. Sometimes you will say orange color with black stripes. They have whiskers. They have large rounded ears. They have long muscular legs. They have long tails, and they have yellow eyes. Right. So this tells us, these features actually tells us that this is actually a tiger. So imagine if it's a lion. So we know that a lion does not have a golden color body with black stripes, right? They do share similar features with tiger, but there are a few features that help to set a lion and a tiger apart. All right. So next, this is the keyword. A species refers to the basic unit of classification. It is a group of organisms that can exchange genetic information and produce fertile offspring that can also produce its own offspring. For example, this is an example of species, lion. So you can see here there we have a family tree of the Lion King. Sarabi, Mustafa, Scar, Simba, Nala, Kira. So these are all lions, right? So they are all considered a species. The reason they are considered a species because it can exchange. Okay, for example, Sarabi and Mustafa, uh, if they would have babies, right? If or they would let's say not say baby, let's say if they were to mate, right? When the female lion and the male lion they mate together, they will actually produce an offspring. So in this case here we have Simba as the offspring of Sarabi and Mustafa. So Simba, being a lion, can also produce its own offspring when it mate with a female lion. So in this case, we have Nala, right? Simba and Nala. So both of them would mate, and then they would give birth to a baby lion. So in this case, we have Kiara. So this is an example of a species. Okay, always remember, a species refers to a group of organisms that can exchange genetic information, right, and produce fertile offspring. And also at the same time, their offspring can also produce offspring. So, so some individuals, they are from two different species and they could also reproduce. So in this case, we call them hybrids. So a hybrid refers to the offspring produced by reproduction between two different species, right? Okay, remember the keyword. It's a reproduction between two different species. So a hybrid cannot produce its own offspring. So can you think of a few hybrids in this world? Here I have listed two hybrids. For example, we have liger. So a liger is a crossbreed between a male lion and a female tiger. So we know that a lion and a tiger, they are of two different species. So if they were to mate and produce an offspring, they would produce a hybrid, which in this case we call them a liger. So a male is the offspring of a male donkey and a female horse. So here we have an example of a male, and this is an example of a liger. All right. So many of the characteristics of a species are adaptations that helps it to survive. So if the environment of a habitat changes, the characteristics of a species no longer help it to survive, and this would actually cause a risk of extinction. So what do you mean by extinction? So extinction of a species, it means a species no longer existing in this world or they have been completely wiped out. That means there is no There's no continuation of that species in this world anymore. And here we have a few examples of extinct species. First of all, this is the dodo bird, and we have the West African black rhinoceros. We have the Tasmanian tiger, and lastly, we have here a woolly mammoth. So woolly mammoth they actually had adaptations to survive extreme cold weather, and and as the world has changes, as the world has changed, sorry, as the world has changed for many of years, uh, we do know that woolly mammoth actually were around on this earth about 10,000 years ago. So the temperature back in 10,000 years ago, it was actually really different compared to the temperature right now. Back then, the Arctic was really cold. So as years went by, the temperature actually rised. So the hairy coats made the mammals too hot, and the plants that they ate could also not survive a higher temperature. So this actually lead to the extinction of the woolly mammoth, right? So there's also a few reasons why animals or why plants would actually face extinction. So here are a few reasons why living things will actually face extinction. First of all, the loss of habitat or habitat destruction. So in this photo here, you see these logging activities, or sometimes we call it deforestation. So we actually cleared out the forest. So when we clear out a forest, this causes animals to actually lose their homes. Right. So when animals lose their home, they cannot find shelter. They lost their source of food. Right. Next reason for extinction will be pollution. Right. For example, here you see there are lots of garbage here. So uh, when we dispose our rubbish into the river, it will actually lead to water pollution. One of the things that we commonly dispose into the river are plastic bags, right? So there are cases where when a human have actually disposed their plastic bags into the sea, and the sea turtle, if they were to accidentally ingest or were to accidentally uh, feed on the plastic bag, it will actually cause the sea turtles to actually choke, and which leads to breathing difficulties, and that would actually ultimately kill the sea turtles. So another reasons for extinction would be changes in physical factors such as climate change. So one of the example would be global warming. So as global warming, it means that the temperature of the world is actually rising, and especially in places like the Arctic and Antarctic. So polar bears, they actually, if you look at this picture here, polar bears actually lives on ice. So having ice, having the snow mountains, having the ice melted, so this will actually causes the polar bear have less places to live on, right? So without a proper place to live on, without a proper habitat, they would actually face risk of extinction. So another reason for extinction would be killing by people, such as poaching. So in this photo here, you can see this man uh, actually hunted this rhinoceros. So the rhinoceros, they are often being hunted for their horns, so which they believe that has medicinal purpose, and we also know that the horn actually could sell for a really high price. So poaching activities will actually cause uh, animals like rhinoceros face extinction. Oh, And sometimes uh, the risk of extinction is caused by the introduction of a new predator. For example, let's say let's give an example where there's this forest here. So it used to only have wolf to hunt for the deers in the forest. So imagine if today if I were to put in tiger into the forest. So the tiger and the wolf would actually compete with one another to hunt for the deer. So with a lesser amount of deer in the forest, it means that both tiger and both the wolf would have actually less food to eat, and they will actually go into starvation, and uh, animals has a potential of dying of hunger. So when we actually introduce a new species into environment, they could actually spoil the ecosystem. It could also disrupt the food chain. So that actually cause a risk of extinction in certain species in that ecosystem. Another reason for extinction would be disease. All right. So imagine a virus were to suddenly strike a local a local livestock farm, where place where they grow animals, where they sorry, a pig farm, for example. Let's say a pig farm. So they will actually kill off the pig, and if the disease is not being controlled properly, so they would actually cause extinction of a certain species. So imagine if the disease, or imagine the virus would hit a certain rare species of animal and endangered species. And if a cure is not found, if actions are not taken, so these rare species or these endangered species will actually face extinction. So a last reason for extinction is the competition of resources with other organisms. Right? And lastly, we have biodiversity hotspots. So what are biodiversity hotspots? Biodiversity hotspots, they are referred to areas where many different species live and at the same time threatened with destruction. So here I have a few biodiversity hotspots in the world. There are actually currently 36 biodiversity hotspots in the worldwide. Right? So let's head back to the previous slide. So again, biodiversity hotspots are areas where they have many different species living at there, and at the same time, they are threatened with destruction. So in order to qualify as a biodiversity hotspot, right, it must fulfill two criteria. The first criteria that it has to fulfill is it must contain at least 1,500 species of vascular plants, or more than 0.5% of the world's total, found nowhere else on Earth. So these are called endemic species. And the second criteria that they must fulfill is it must have lost at least 70% of its original native habitat. So in order for you to further understand what are biodiversity hotspots, I would like you to actually click on this link here, right? Please click on the link. So I will actually attach the link in the material post. So please look out for it and click on the link and look at it. All right. So lastly, a reminder, there are currently 36 biodiversity hotspots around the world. All right, we have reached the end of the chapter. So again, in this topic, we have touched on variation. What is variation? All right, what is a species? What is a hybrid? and what are the certain reasons, right? What are certain reasons of living organisms facing extinction, right? So we have come to the end, and I'll see you on the next chapter, right? I'm signing off.